With regards to the ABLE account, the legislation for the ABLE account was patterned after the legislation that brought about the 529 college savings accounts. In a way, in essence, the ABLE accounts ABLE legislation, Achieving a Better Life Experience, passed at the end of 2014, was a response to parents that were perhaps saving money to 529s for those that were college bound, but the question loomed of how can we save for one that may not be college bound? So the ABLE accounts came about, and so the taxation is similar. ABLE accounts receive funds that are after tax, meaning regular savings dollars. They grow tax-free, and then distributions that are made tax-free. Now, ABLE accounts need to stay under $100,000 in terms of total, and it would be difficult to get there unless someone were putting $14,000 a year in for 7 years in succession or something. But you need to stay under $100,000 to maintain SSI or supplemental security income eligibility. At $100,000, you lose SSI eligibility, and then there's a higher limit where actually you can even lose Medicaid eligibility with an ABLE account. It's very, very high, and I don't see people reaching that limit. But nevertheless, it's understanding those limitations. But from a tax standpoint, to answer your question, after-tax dollars go in, grows tax-free, and distributions are tax-free.
Okay.
So,
Richard, what about special needs trust?
The trust in and of itself is a separate legal entity, so it is a taxpayer. Earnings from assets that are in the trust are taxable for a special needs trust, which is why it's so important to work with a financial person, somebody like Gordon, that can structure the trust assets to minimize any tax burden. But it's important to realize that the earnings can be taxable.
So, for instance, let's use the real property example. So say there was an investment property bought for the trust, and the income from that rental property was for the use of the person with Down syndrome. So the income would be taxed at a regular rate.
The initial contribution of the property is not taxable. That's a donation to the trust. But the rental income would be taxable. Trusts do not receive a favorable tax rate, therefore they would pay according to an IRS schedule on what those earnings might be, subject of course to the traditional deductions and that sort of thing.
Okay.
now to add to that, a third-party special needs trust can be a qualifying disability trust, and so and this would basically is contingent upon the trust beneficiary meeting the Social Security definition of disability. But because of that, there are some tax advantages on the early income in a third-party special needs trust. So while trust tax rates are higher than individual rates for the same amount of income, with regards to a third-party special needs trust, the tax advantages allow actually the initial up to $4,000 of what would otherwise be taxable to receive favorable tax consideration as a qualifying disability trust. So I appreciate Richard mentioning that, because sometimes people hear that trust, the tax rates are so high with trust that you should steer clear of them. But unique to third-party special needs trusts, again, for an individual that meets the definition of Social Security disability, then there are actually tax advantages, and we often see the need to get into literally thousands of dollars in annual income generated before there's any meaningful tax situation. And that's where we try to work with the tax individuals and preparers that understand disability trust, because there are some advantages sometimes overlooked.
Okay. Another second part of the question is, let's talk about after the person with Down syndrome has passed, what happens to the balance of both the ABLE account and the special needs trust? What are the differences? Are there some similarities? So do you want to start with the ABLE?
Okay.
Gordon?
With an ABLE account, basically a person could make a provision for who is to receive their account balance upon their death. Before before an account beneficiary would receive their funds, though, the state Medicaid claim has to be satisfied. So if an individual has had the Michelle P. waiver, has had the SCL waiver, has had disability Medicaid, which has assisted with their medical expenses, this type of thing. Unless they have a very large ABLE account balance, I think it's reasonable to assume that the balance will in its entirety go to satisfy the state's claim.
And the claim is based on, for instance, an average budget for a Michelle P. participant might be as much as $40,000 a year. So if there's $60,000 balance in an ABLE account, then because that person's been served year after year, and is it contingent on how many years the ABLE account's been open?
Yes.
Okay.
So for that reason, ABLE accounts really should be viewed as build up, tear down, save and spend type of accounts.
Like a checking account, maybe?
Right. So set your goal. I want to purchase this, or I want to purchase that, or I want to to take this trip. Save it up, and then use it and spend it. But it does not appear at this point that it's going to be a good strategy for long-term accumulation of funds.
Okay.
But again, the third-party special needs trust is really ideal in those situations, and literally a community can contribute to one special needs trust. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, anyone and everyone is welcome to participate, no matter how small or large the donation, as Richard said, and it can be while they're living and enjoy the satisfaction of seeing it be helpful, and then it can be incorporated into any number of people's estate plans. Go ahead though with the.
Well, the third-party trust does not have a reimbursement requirement. So, to follow up on what Gordon was saying, that those assets could be delegated by the grantor of the trust, typically the parents, to go to other family members, siblings, or church, or a charity, and so it makes it a wonderful planning tool, unlike the ABLE account where you're going to be faced with that reimbursement.
Okay. Well, as we are concluding this session, I'd like for both of y'all to have an opportunity. If there was one piece of advice that you would give, whether it's a family who has a young little infant, which I get to meet a new baby tomorrow, or a sibling who is now caring for their adult sibling after their parents are either infirmed or passed away. If you could put in a nutshell, what's the most important thing that they need to consider, and I'll let y'all both answer that in your own way. So think about that for a moment.
That's a tough question.
Well, I'll start.
All right.
Two things come to mind. One is a focus on the quality of life. And as like Richard, as the parent of a child with special needs, their quality of life is so important. And my wife and I, we do everything that we can to enhance Matt's quality of life while we're here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only natural that we want that quality of life to be maintained when we're no longer here. And so I would encourage parents to read and seek information, to seek the counsel of caring professionals like Richard and I, in an effort again to preserve that quality of life for as long as possible for them. And the last thing I would mention would be legacy. What we do leave, we want it to be honored. We want it to be used in a manner consistent with our values and our focus on family and that type of thing. And so a lot of the planning that Richard and I do, it's smart planning to squeeze out everything possible for the benefit of those that you love from the resources that you've worked so hard to accumulate and put in place.
Good advice. Richard, what about you?
I don't know that I could change it or add to that. I was thinking plan ahead, but that pretty much says it all. It's so important to take the time to ask the hard questions. Who's going to do this if I'm not here? What can I do to make things better? Those are hard questions, and And that's why I chuckled when you asked the question, because sometimes there aren't easy answers to those questions. And so if you can deal with the things that Gordon mentioned, I think that would be the very first place to start.
I agree. And as I talk to families, to me, the best gift that you can give your child or your adult is a plan. Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to have to just depend on, oh, we think it's going to work out. As much as we think that we'll be on this earth forever, we do all have expiration dates, but we want to make sure that our loved ones have the best possible life, even if we're not participating at that time. So, well, I thank you all so much for your time, for your wisdom. Again, to our families and those that are listening and watching today, if you need more information, you'll see at the end of this presentation contact information for both states' ABLE accounts, also for Richard and Gordon. And of course, you can always call DSL for any of your questions, whether it's financial or whatever it might be. We're always here to help. Thank you very much.